Good morning, and we are reopening day 2 of the meeting. It is August 24th.
So, I guess it's up to you for meeting logistics. Oh, sorry. We're moving too fast this morning.
Okay, reconvene.
We've reconvened.
So reconvening is short. Hi, just a reminder that the meeting is being recorded. It will be posted to the website as soon as it's processed. For those who weren't here yesterday, a reminder that the restrooms are around the corner, make a left. We do have our meeting ground rules, asking people to listen carefully for understanding, honor the guidance of the chair and the facilitator, to be respectful and assume that all of us are coming from good intentions. Please minimize sidebar conversations in the room and online. Also, something that I get busted on regularly, please turn your phone to silent. And if you need to take a call, please step outside the room. On our agenda review, I believe that the very first item this morning will be an update from Lindsay on the description regarding land use on the request for consideration of tribal treaty rights. And then we'll go into the agenda. The draft advice on transuranic waste management has been redirected back to committee. And will we be entering then right into the HAB administrative business? Yes, we'll be flowing into that. We'll adjust the break or reconsider the break accordingly. After the HAB administrative business, and we know there's a lot of conversation that wants to, that will take place on that, we'll go into public comment and break for lunch. After lunch, we'll have committee updates and other new board business. Is there anything that people expected to see or wanted to see that isn't on the agenda? And are there any new announcements since yesterday regarding the work of the HAB? With that, I think we're over to you, Lindsay, correct?
We are, and I'm actually going to turn this over to Carrie Meyer.
Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Carrie Meyer. I am a manager with the Department of Energy, and discussions regarding a request to add some scope to your land use, infrastructure, and disposal committee. So the safety aspect is great. Don't have any concerns with that. But in regards to the treaty rights consideration, so DOE has a government-to-government relationship with the tribes that's guided by our tribal policy and order. We continue to engage with the tribes on cleanup activities, protection of resources, decisions, but we cannot support including the language while considering treaty rights into the scope of this committee. DOE has a unique relationship with the tribes. We will continue to honor that relationship through the many different avenues that we have in place, including government to government interactions. So it's important that each person holding a seat, holding a seat on the HAB, it recognizes and represents their unique perspectives, and to ask the HAB members to agree with tribal perspectives really contradicts the spirits and values of the board. So with that, I just will sum it up and say the department cannot support the addition of consideration of tribal treaty rights into an advisory board subcommittee.
Go ahead, Rebecca, and then Lorraine.
So I guess that the conversation yesterday was to add that
verbiage into the community outreach and engagement committee, where it says and concerns public health and safety issues, and then the language for that tribal,
So
that was,
regardless of whichever committee,
yeah.
we can't support adding the in consideration of tribal treaty rights. We do have all of the other avenues there, and that's where it is most appropriate. There are, in addition to the programs we have, there are legal implications as well.
Right. I understand.
But I'll leave it to
yeah.
Lindsay to talk about
Okay.
which committee.
It's like Lorraine had a question. Oh, and I think we'll let them. Go ahead, Lorraine.
Thank you. I guess having heard this, I am still concerned and I am still going to, I guess, keep, I guess, keep reiterating the importance of the, treaty rights. I'm the only tribal representative at this table, and the reason why we are engaged in the HAB is for the purposes of representing the interests and the cultural and religious significance to the area. And none of you are going to know that. So unless I keep bringing this forward and sharing it, and it becomes acceptable to the entire group, I will keep bringing this up because it is very important. And I understand the government to government relationship. And so maybe that's what we need to do is, engage it at that level and just keep pushing forward with this so that, we have proper recognition and acknowledgement. And I did notice yesterday, and I didn't bring it up, but like I said, if I don't say it, it's not going to get said. I, at one point in a previous meeting, had requested that the land acknowledgement be incorporated into the opening statements for this meeting. And I did share with, I'll have to look at my emails, but I did forward the language to somebody, and I'll keep forwarding that to you for consideration. And I am going to ask that Rose kind of expand on our, I guess, our perception to this whole matter and kind of add a little bit more information to this for you as well. Thank you.
Go ahead, Rose, and then it'll be Rob.
Thank you. So I understand where DOE is coming from with regards to treaty rights / government to government relationship. It is the treaty that basically has established that relationship. And so I kind of get that. I see where you guys are coming from that, but I think part of what we're asking for is I think that there needs to be an awareness and a constant awareness and a constant reminder to the group that when the tribes are sitting at the table, we're sitting at the table. The reason that we're here is because there is that treaty. And I think that sometimes gets lost, that people don't realize why we're here. When we had the meeting in Yakima and we invited folks to come out to the cultural center to be able to share Yakima Nation culture, just to have a meal together and to provide the opportunity for folks to get to know who Yakima Nation was. I mean, there was purpose to that. It's important for this group to understand why Yakima Nation is sitting at this table. Why is Yakima Nation sitting at the trustee council table? It is because of that treaty. But that being said, and I think I think there needs to be more discussion about that, but setting that aside, at a point when we're talking about in our land use, infrastructure, waste disposition, for this committee, I also very much agree that the safety part needs to be there. That's it should never have probably not been there. We agree that that definitely needs to be added. So we don't have a problem with that at all. However, when we're talking about long-term stewardship, I do believe that there needs to be something still put in there that takes into consideration, that long-term stewardship takes into consideration historic resources, cultural resources, or historic resources. We could even say historic resources, which would include tribal cultural resources, because we need to manage for those resources to some extent. And I think it's important that people recognize that that's part of the advice that we're giving and whatnot, has to take into consideration those resources. Doesn't matter if it's really the national park resources or, root grounds, that the tribal tribes would use, or traditional cultural properties. But the management, the long-term stewardship, and I am working feverishly on this with the Stigwig group. I'm working with this on a national level, and I think that it's something that is important to have in a description like this, because it is something that we are working on with DOE at a national level for all of the sites, to take into consideration the role and the responsibility to cultural resources in long-term stewardship. And so I guess I would say, if you're not at this time finding the language to use to say treaty in there, I think we at least need to acknowledge that long-term stewardship issues need to take into consideration historic resources and cultural resources.
Thanks, Rose. Thanks, Lorraine. So a couple things. First of all, as you mentioned, there's the state tribal government working group. We also have the Hanford's tribal government working group. And as I said just a few minutes ago, it is important that every person representing a seat here bring their perspectives to discussion. And that's why we have specific tribal seats. So there's no reason that you can't bring those aspects to the discussion and raise them just like anybody else on the board would. But it doesn't require that we put it into the actual specific scope, because if you put it in the scope, you're really inviting other people to interpret what that means for you. I mean, I think that's the other aspect that is challenging. So the tribes will represent their perspectives and the facts regarding their treaty rights and the management of cultural resources to the discussion, but it's not something that we can support putting into that language, because we have, as I said, those specific programs in place for that. And that's where those should reside formally. Again, it doesn't mean that you wouldn't, when we're talking about long-term stewardship, raise concerns. Okay, so is this board, any advice you're giving, does it infringe on those rights? Or is it not in alignment with the cultural resource and protections that are so critical to the tribes? You should bring that up, and that should be discussed, but it doesn't need to be in the scope to do that.
So if I'm hearing you right, we're able to bring it up as a discussion point, but it shouldn't be in the scope as something that's just automatically part of what the consideration should be. And I don't know that I agree with that thinking. I'm just saying I don't agree with that thinking, because I feel like if you are going to talk about long-term stewardship, a big portion of long-term stewardship that is always forgotten, because it's not written everywhere. And believe me, I've poured over these documents because I'm working, with the small committee that's been dealing with this on a national level. So I've poured over these documents, and it's not listed everywhere. It's listed some places, but not in all places. And because of that, there's the ideology that it's a sideline consideration, and it should not be a sideline consideration. We are sitting at this table because of treaty rights and because of the protection of cultural resources under the National Historic Preservation Act, the consideration of all federal decisions. And if the consideration of federal decisions and how that will affect cultural resources, when we give advice under that law, when we give advice, we need to take into consideration that we're in line with that law. And I think that it's not that big of a stretch to make sure that the consideration of cultural resources actually written in this so that everybody's aware that that is part of this, that you have to take those historic resources into consideration. So I'm looking at this very differently than you, but I think that it needs to be written. It's not written enough places. I'd like to see that changed. Right now, we're working on what is the true definition of long-term stewardship. Do you know how long I've been working on that? Years been working on what the definition of long-term stewardship is. And we're just, I think now starting to make some progress on that. And I think it's important that we grab hold of that and we embrace it for what it is. And you guys, we've put long-term stewardship in here. There needs to be, in consideration of historic resource, there needs to be attached to that. So
Thank you. I just want to, I guess, emphasize in looking at, the entire reason any of us are sitting here, the basis of which we operate on, through the HAB, it takes into consideration the different sites, but it's right in your your website here on the membership application that it should always, you need to consider and reflect a full diversity of viewpoints. And that's what we're reflecting. So, like I said, that's my purpose of being here. And so I think, we'll keep going forward and continue to grow so that we're all at the same level of understanding. You stated that, if we added this language or some verbiage in here, that it could be interpreted differently by anyone. Sure, we all have different viewpoints. I can read the same sentence and we would all maybe, if any of you read the same sentence, you may have a different perspective or a different opinion. But this is exactly why I'm driving this forward, is because we need to be of the same opinion because we're Hanford Advisory Board. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Rob, let's hear from Rob, Esteban, and then Amber.
Yeah, I think we can all appreciate the concerns that Rose and Lorraine have. But my question is the objection that DOE has to adding, something something else in the those descriptions, is it objecting to a specific interest to add? Because it almost sounds like you're objecting to specifically the tribal interests.
So that is not what we're objecting to. We are objecting to the entry of the treaty rights aspect because resides in other programs and it resides in a different relationship. We're not saying it should not be considered. It absolutely should be considered. And my experience over the last 30 years has been that tribal members bring that perspective forward in respective discussions. But to add it here, it is not, so it's one perspective. It would be like, number one, adding something that is important to every person here into the scope. That's not realistic. And again, as I said, we've got a different avenue by which, and it includes legal aspects by which the tribes bring those things forward. And Rose mentioned she's working to increase awareness in those programs. And that's where the focus should be. Again, I'm not saying that they should not bring forward and help everybody here understand what those cultural resource priorities are, what the protections should be, or what their treaty rights are in the discussion. I'm just saying it should not, we're not going to have a committee that their scope is to focus on treaty rights. And that's in part, even though there are other things in it, that's what it would be in part doing.
I'm sorry, but we went beyond the treaty right thing. We said, okay, well, we can deal with that later, but now we're talking about adding to consider, historic resources or cultural resources. We've pivoted the language, so that there still is, in compliance with regulations and whatnot, consideration for cultural resources slash historic resources, however we would want the language to read. So I think we've sidelined the treaty right thing because of what you had said, but we still believe, because you're using long-term stewardship, that there still is obligations under long-term stewardship that need to be considered. And it isn't necessarily just a tribal thing. It could stay historic resources, because there's a lot of historic resources on site that need to be considered in decision-making under the NHPA.
So when it comes to the historic resources, historic cultural resources, that is part of long-term stewardship. The challenge that I have in that is it also flows over into DOE's Office of Legacy Management. And this is an Office of Environmental Management Board. To be frank, I don't know how that would work. I don't know if I even have authority to say that we can do that. That is kind of new space for me. So I guess in my opinion, and my experience, long-term stewardship does and must consider cultural resources, historic cultural resource preservation. And, I don't know if some of my background includes, for a period, leading our site stewardship division. That is, we have staff that are hired to work with the tribes just on those aspects. So again, I'm not able to say we could or could not approve that aspect in this. I'd have to go back and talk with our national park manager, talk with Kelly Snyder, and talk with the Office of Legacy Management. But regardless, I think long-term stewardship does include that. And I think that that is something that when you guys are being briefed on those long-term stewardship issues or items, you should be discussing. And I don't think there's anything that prevents you from bringing that up.
I guess my big concern is these are descriptive of what committees are doing, okay? And to recognize that we must take into consideration historic resources is part of that descriptive. And a lot of people do not associate that with, they don't understand what long-term stewardship is. And so, and I'm fine with, with continuing this conversation with you guys. I don't want to hold up the whole board on this particular aspect of things, but I think that it's important for anybody coming in who would read this to recognize where in here is it talking about this board has to recognize cultural resources or historic values or resources? Nowhere. And we need to find a place for that, because like it or not, under the law, we have to take those considerations in. And so there needs to be a place within here that it shows that this board also is recognizing the role of regulations that guarantee protection, preservation, consideration of historic / cultural resources. And I think attached to the long-term stewardship part is a, just simple verbiage, which includes, consideration of historic resources would serve that role in a very simple way, and it fits very nicely there. But like I say, I don't want to hold up the whole meeting for this discussion. Others have comments too, but we would like to complete this conversation at some point. We feel that it's important enough to make sure that it's somewhere here.
So
And
Rose,
maybe we need to discuss where it needs to live.
so thank you for that. I recommend that we bring this up at the Hanford State and Tribal Government Working Group meeting. And I can commit to attend to that meeting as well if you want to bring that discussion forward. I will let Amanda and Paula or Karen know about it so that they're sure to invite me as well. If that works for you.
Are you talking about for the Hanford Stigwig meeting?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. No, that sounds great. If we can, yeah, we can maybe make sure that that's on the agenda and we can pick up conversation there. And I don't know, we don't necessarily need to hold this up for that, but I guess it would be with the understanding that at the next meeting, we would revisit this. You know, because the next meeting will be after that meeting.
Yep.
And then that way we can revisit this for potential change there after those conversations. Is that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay,
If that
'cause we
is
really
not
don't-
outside of process.
Okay, we
Right.
really don't want to hold up the health and safety portion that, I mean, because we do see the strong value in having that there. So we don't want to hold that up over this, but as long as we commit that we are going to revisit it at the next meeting and potential have yet another edit, then we would be probably fine with that.
Yeah, everyone seemed to say, yay. Okay, thanks.
So Esteban and then
Yes, I think like, like Rebecca mentioned and what we're discussing about, and, I've done this work and this is a big reason I took this role at the Hanford Advisory Board in holding a public at large seat. This is work you got to do. And the big thing, you got to talk to the union workers. What is the health safety? I believe one of your staff is yesterday. I could look back at the notes or the recording. They mentioned public health. Here, the big thing that sometimes to me right away, as as a person, as a Mexican American person, when I talk to people, members in the community, when you mentioned Hanford, they thought Hanford High School. So to me, that was the biggest thing, and I think where it went, believe me, change is hard. I worked in the campaign. Yeah, change is hard, and it takes work and it takes effort. And the biggest thing I think, that a lot of people, and more than anything, I think people that sit on this board have to be conscious. And number one, instead of, some of the stuff that says here, like be respectful, it should be have a conscience and check, and check your egos because times are changing. And like I said, change is hard. And more than anything, doing this work, I think when it was done, it was going to take a lot of time and effort. And we're in that process that I think everybody needs to be aware that right now it's a lot of public health, there's a lot of effect, and it's going to take a lot of work. And I think especially with what the DOE staff mentioned yesterday, where we currently stand, and it's affecting a lot of people, and especially the people of this land and in this community.
thank you.
Thank you.
And we're moving to Amber and then Simone.
Can you hear me okay?
Please speak up a little louder.
Okay, I'm speaking right into my device here. Does that help?
Oh, yes, and we can just hear you, so go ahead.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to weigh in and say that I and Heart of America Northwest supports the language around long-term stewardship of historic or cultural resources. It's a core consideration. Our land use decisions now will determine the long-term stewardship. So it's clearly something that should be part of the land use committee. And we believe it's a core consideration, just like public safety, worker health, public health. So we would definitely support adding that language. I think it needs to be in there. So I look forward to hearing back from this committee that's going to meet and bring back some language to that effect. And the land acknowledgement is a wonderful required thing that we should be doing at our HAB meeting. So I really hope we will incorporate that into the next HAB meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to Simone and then Shannon.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Loud and clear. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I just want to second what Amber said. Columbia Riverkeeper also supports adding that language in and supports what Rose and Laureen were bringing up. I would also just like to point out that treaty rights are not a perspective and should not be compared to all other scopes and interests that are on the board. They're separate and unique and should be considered so. And I just want to make sure that we do get a report back from the STIGWIG on where this language goes and a follow-up. And I also recall Laureen bringing up the land acknowledgement several meetings ago and have heard nothing since then. So I would like an update on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Shannon,
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
we can loud and clear. Thank you.
Great. So I'm Shannon Cram. This is actually my last meeting after 10 years on the board. And I want to say that what I'm hearing from Rose and Lorraine and others is a request that this conversation happen more regularly and more centrally in our committee discussions about land use. Not necessarily that a particular outcome is agreed upon in these meetings, but that the conversation be had. And in my 10 years on the board, I would say that talking about long-term stewardship of historic resources hasn't been at the center of a lot of our conversations in committee. And the ask here is to make that more central and less invisible in our conversations, to remind us to continually consider long-term stewardship of historic resources and its connection to the current cleanup actions that we are discussing in our policy conversations. So I really strongly support the addition of this language and the encouragement for this practice of bringing this topic to our committee conversations on a regular basis as a central way we're thinking about cleanup itself. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for your service on the HAB. Rob and then Janice.
I'd like to point out that where was everybody when we had these meetings to discuss this back 3-4 months ago? We talked about this. We also heard from Brian Vance that said safety's in everything. Every committee should be considering safety. The second thing is the document that we're talking about here is a description of our 2024 work plan. Okay, if we have many other documents, MOUs and other stuff where tribes are mentioned prolifically that we consider and invite them. This last, as mentioned, we went to the Yakima. There's a lot of stuff there that most of us learn new things. And certainly those considerations are going to be there. But I think for a simple work plan for this year, and we're arguing over lots of little words here when we know the tribes are here, we respect them, we want them, we listen to them. We're making a lot to do about really, I think nothing for this year's work plan. I mean, what's the land use committee going to do? Have a couple meetings and try to get an understanding of what we mean. This is a new venture. So far, we've kind of stayed very clear of final end up use because a lot of the holistic negotiations we don't know the end of and other factors in there, and then we could just spin ourselves into circles. The other thing is when we start adding language, remember Mike Birkengeil came in, he says, I looked at all these documents here and 6 documents all have different descriptions of every committee. We have to combine it together. We have to put it together. We can't have orphan documents out there that confuse people. And so the interpretation of the language, you know, it's only a work plan for this year. Next year, we have another work plan. Next year, next May, we'll be starting to discuss what the work plan is for this 25. So I think maybe I've just talked too much about this, but that's my opinion. I think that we got it covered. I think that we all respect everybody here. It's not a sign of disrespect not having it in a work plan here, but you know, if we want to use the word tribes, or I mean, take a look at the other documents, the MOUs, the other things that we have, and who we're advising, and you'll see that the tribes are present. Thank you.
Thank you. And Janice.
Wow, what a great discussion. You know, we're just really happy that tribal and cultural interests are being brought to the board. We've worked hard. I think the people who make the selections for the Hanford Advisory Board are always looking for people who represent various viewpoints, and we welcome these to be spoken and represented to the whole board. The tricky part of this, of course, has to do with the fact that we're a consensus board. And so every person has powerful agency to make their viewpoint have an impact on the business of the board. Now, I agree with Carrie that there are other like avenues for tribal engagement, and I'm glad that you have those, in those places. But I have to say, since I've been on the board and had the honor of meeting Russell Jim and the kind of spirit that he brought to the board, I have to say that I'm delighted that you have made the commitment to be here. And I know other tribal entities could also be at the table. And having an Hispanic representation on the board is so important. You mentioned language yesterday. It's so important. And so I just kind of want to wrap it up in the ways that I think about it. When we talk about long-term management, there's a part of the Department of Energy that does take care of legacy management. Once the cleanup is finished to everyone's satisfaction, it gets turned over for long-term management, So there's a different, I don't know if they have a FACA, I don't know if they have a board, but there's another place for talking about long-term stewardship. I think that if we put tribal language having to do with the committees and so on, I think um, that you're obligating yourself to be a part of every committee that has that and to be there every time. You can represent your point of view in every meeting that you go to without the language being there. And it's going to be true because of who you are. It's just going to be true because you're there. And I thought that Ginger brought very reasonable kind of compromise language yesterday when she said, maybe we could just add like culturally appropriate. And I thought, oh, that's not a bad idea. Maybe that is a way to like skirt this issue having to do with what we call tribal. Maybe we just try to write the documents so that we ask ourselves to always be cognizant of that. But I think that Rose, with your participation in national working groups, obviously the nuclear complex across the United States has impacted tribes all over the country. And so that's a very good place for those kinds of things to be considered as well. But I think as time goes by, more and more, we who have had a kind of tunnel vision about how things will work, I think that we are going to be sensitized to the fact that we always have to be considering the various viewpoints. And that's where Susan comes in, because Susan is the consensus builder for the HAB. And it's a heavy responsibility to make sure that everyone's voice is heard, accepted, encouraged, and incorporated into the thinking of the HAB. So thank you.
And thanks all for a really great discussion that talks about the complexities and nuances and intricacies and considerations that need to be addressed. We have an action going forward to think about revisiting language to be brought to the next meeting. So, Susan.
Okay, 2 steps. First step. Are we in agreement? Do we have a consensus that Carrie and Lindsay will take the discussion, the continued discussion to the Hanford Stigwig, and then bring back a report to the next board meeting, which is early December. So,
The only thing I would want to add to that is all of these, all of what you said is true, but that there's the understanding then that we could potentially then be looking at maybe doing a language change after that. You didn't say that part of it.
sorry.
So we want to,
Yes.
we're leaving it open to entertain language change. That's the
Totally
only thing
agree.
I'd add.
And like I said
Yeah.
yesterday, this is a living document. It is not engraved in concrete. This is one of our core working documents that we can revisit at any time. And
Yeah, so that, and
So,
I do want to, I need to address something just for the group too, just so that you guys understand that, we are governed by Yakima Nation Tribal Council. And one of our main directives when we're working at Hanford is to get things in writing. It's important for Yakima Nation to have things in writing. And so it's important for us to have things in writing, to have some of this stuff actually listed down. And so we're following that directive to the fullest. And that's why I just want people to understand that. That's why, we're sitting here. That's why we're saying the things that we're saying, is because we are following a directive from our leadership.
thank you. So do we have a consensus for the path forward on this topic? Any dispute? Okay, that is the path forward for this topic. Now, do we have consensus for the changes that were proposed as of yesterday, which included the 2 additional changes of correcting the spelling of the, okay, CARM and, well, and lids. Lowercase a and then lids. So as of right now, do we have consensus for this version?
Which is version 2.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, then we have an approved new version of the committee descriptions.
So if we can check with the 2 people who were going to withhold consensus yesterday, as opposed to just, so it was, I believe, Yakima Nation and Heart of America were the 2 interests or seats on the board that were going to withhold consensus. So I think we have a path forward for Yakima, but Amber?
Well, for the record, we don't consent to moving forward without the change. I appreciate that there's going to be an attempt to have a meeting. I think the expectation has to be that there has to be some language that's agreed to. So for the record, we can't consent.
Then unfortunately, if we cannot reach consensus on this version, we go back to the approved version from the April board meeting, which does not include safety in the wording. Worker health and safety. Pam.
That when you reworked the documents, we now have a more clear path to proceed even without consensus.
This is a board consensus approved document. It was approved in April. Any changes to it have to go through the consensus process also.
You guys have told us, well, all your mystery meetings that you redid the documents, and there is a more clear path to adopt advice and note that somebody isn't happy with it.
I believe that's our understanding as well.
Rebecca?
Pam, well, and before Becky starts speaking, Pam, can you provide more clarification to the mystery meetings? I'm a little confused.
Well, they're a mystery to me. So, I mean, all these people that met for months and weeks, and went through everything and came up with this goofy name for the tanks committee. That's who I'm talking about. Thank you.
So how I understand it is that the operations work group had their meetings, then the document was presented and approved at the April board meeting. At the leadership workshop, there were a few concerns that were brought up. One of them being worker health and safety was not incorporated into the verbiage by Becky. And then there were some editorial comments, Pam, that you brought forward. And so that's what was being addressed. And that was supposed to come to the board meeting. Now this conversation has expanded. And so that's kind of how we got where we are. Now, I think Dan Solitz has been having his table tent tipped for quite some time. So Becky, if you could just hang tight so
Oh,
Dan can
thank you.
speak.
Yes, my understanding from the last 6 or 7 years on the board was that the end use, land use was something that the board committees needed to understand what the goals were so that we could shape our advice to meet those goals, not that we were going to decide what the future should be or could be, but we were looking for the goalposts and the end use, the land use. Those are the goalposts. We would shape our advice to meet those goalposts. And so I think that's considerations kind of gotten lost in this discussion. So I hope we can bring it back to that, because the HAB isn't going to decide what the future of the land will be. There'll be many, many, many other outside forces.
Becky, go on. You have a vested interest in this topic too.
Well, yeah, I just want to remind everyone that, these committees were all renamed and reworked, and this committee for years was called Health, Safety and Environmental Protection Committee. It focused on worker health and safety, the environment, environmental protection. And we covered a lot of like emergency response, infrastructure, things like that. This has all been reworded, and
These mics are going dead, Danny, just so you know. There.
that one's not working either.
Battery.
Okay, this one works now. So I also know in the past when we have done advice, if we had someone that was objecting to advice, that we had a process in place for dissenting opinion as far as why they did not want to agree to the advice. And I don't know if that process is still in place with all the new documents that we have and all the reworking that we have, but I guess I would ask Amber if she's objecting to adding the worker health and safety to this committee, which was originally what this committee was in the first place, and if she would object to writing a dissenting opinion.
I would like to, this is my first time, hope that I'm following protocol. I would like to go back to Yakama Nation and just confirm, following up on Tom Silica's recommendation, is that yesterday there was an objection to moving forward with updating the committee descriptions as had been edited. There was a discussion today saying that the concern about culturally appropriate or cultural historic resources is going to be taken by Carrie back to DOE, addressed at the next, and I'll get this wrong, the next tribal committee meeting. Apologies that I don't know this, with possible language coming forward in December. With those caveats, I just want to confirm, are you willing to accept the edits to date for revision 2 on the committee descriptions? I just want to get clear. Okay.
Thank you. And it's, I guess working through this process, the Yakama Nation is still going to object to it because of the fact that it's not resolved from our perspective. And I feel that, our the working group itself, the diversity factor needs to be remedied within this working group. Because we are different from the other sites, and this is Hanford and this is Yakama Nation, and the other sites don't necessarily have these issues. It's specific to our board. So that's our answer.
Okay. Becky, thank you for refreshing my memory. I now have the book open. So the reading from the book, the OGR, our operating guide rules document, states under major and minor procedural changes, which includes committees or other subunits of the board, on and on. But if the board is unable to achieve a consensus on a major procedural issue, then a 2/3 majority vote will determine whether the board will follow a proposed course of action, so long as there exists a quorum of the board members or alternates that consist of at least 1/2 of the full number of board seats. So this is one of those few times that we transition from a consensus board to actually holding a vote on a decision.
Susan, is that the new operating ground?
Now, this is the current approved guidelines.
Okay,
So this is the book as of 2008.
okay. So she's looking at a document, she said that was approved down, or I'm sorry,
This is the
2008. Go ahead, Susan.
sorry, this is the current operating ground rules document.
From 2008.
No,
Not the
that
green
one.
sheet document. This is our document. This is our bylaws.
Yeah, the new operating ground rules are still with the DFO at headquarters for review. And so the board is still operating with their previous operating ground rules as they stood.
So in accordance to our current approved operating, I'm going to use the term bylaws for simple practice, but it's the operating ground rules, then we can go to a vote. Do it. Jan,
So I was a part of the mystery meetings. I would caution against going to a vote on this. I think that the ground rules don't really specify what an important thing is that requires us to vote instead of reach consensus. Susan, I really need your attention on this. The ground rules don't really specify what is important enough to go to a vote. But we have laid out a process that I think could lead to consensus, but not today. We already know that some of it's going to go back to headquarters. We already know some other things about this, that we should not, I don't think we're well advised to short circuit that process to decide for this particular issue that majority vote will rule. Because if we go to voting today, then I think we'll have voting for every time, or could have voting for every time we don't have consensus. I think that we have an obligation to try to reach consensus on such a sensitive matter and not just overrule some voices from Heart of America or the Yakama tribe so that we can complete this today. I think that that we have some agreement about some of the language changes, and I think that we should go forward with that, not go back to last April, and look forward to the day when these questions can be resolved amicably among all the members who have objections.
And to address, Becky, your concerns about the worker health and safety, do understand if this document doesn't get approved to move forward with that language included, DOE is still committed to addressing worker health and safety and incorporating it into that committee.
Well, and we're committed to incorporating it into every committee. So if there are aspects that are specific to others, we will bring them there as well. You've all heard Brian Vance say it. That is
Amber, you're up.
I just wanted to say that Heart of America is not opposed to adding the worker health and safety, but we just firmly believe that the core consideration of historic or cultural resources should be included in the land use description. So I'm not sure how we can address that today, except maybe write a dissenting opinion or be on the record as opposed to that particular issue.
so here's my question for you all. I mean, this is a living document. We've already committed to taking this to the Hanford State and Tribal Government Working Group for a formal discussion, and that we would bring it back for discussion in December. So I don't understand why it is apparently impossible for the board to reach consensus on adding worker health and safety, knowing that we're going to bring the other back. The fact is if you were to proceed with the other aspect today, it would come to DOE and we would not concur on it. And subcommittee determinations are ultimately the responsibility of DOE. So we're agreeing to work with you on this. It's kind of surprising to me that the board is so reticent to incorporate the aspect that you all agree on, recognizing that we have said on the record, we're going to go back and talk about this with the tribes and the appropriate people and bring it back in December.
I believe that the options right now are if there are a couple of options. One, if the proposal to adopt the current revisions for version 2 of the document could be adopted today as an iterative process with version 3 to address the new topics coming forward. So that's one option that could occur. There could be objections and there's other options, Ryan.
Can I offer a suggestion? This is just coming from the work plan that was approved last year or the year before. Tom, you might have some more insight into this. The work plan was approved by consensus either last year or the year before, but there was some kind of statement that was written with some kind of understanding. I think it's because the board member seats weren't approved at the time, but so the work plan was passed with a statement to something to some effect. So could that same thing happen where there's still consensus on this item, but there's some kind of disclaimer at the bottom saying this is approved with the understanding that this is going to be brought back for further. I don't know. I'm just trying to come up with options.
So that process was you can withhold consent but not block the product and add a signing statement that says in that case Oregon did not consent to the document because there were people who were not able to be at the table at the time. So we said, we don't want to block this moving forward, but here's why we didn't voice our consent. So if we were able to do something like that here with maybe Yakima and Heart of America, if you're interested in having that being written at the bottom that says Yakima Nation and Heart of America did not consent to this change, because we want to see this additional language in there. So it's in there, but it's not having to go through the DOE approval process. At this point, we can wait until December to do that. That might be a path forward.
Amber just said she agrees with Tom
Oh.
in chat. Great suggestion.
Right. So, and I just want to address this thing having to do with safety. You know, when we were trying to construct those new committees, we had a kind of a special pot of what do they call it? Cross-cutting issues. And that's where safety went, that's where budget went. Because every committee has budgetary concerns and every committee has safety concerns. And that's how it happened, that safety kind of dropped off when we decided not to do the cross-cutting committee at all. And so you're quite right in saying that there should be language having to do with safety because it is tantamount to everything else. So anyway, just to let you know that that was part of the mystery negotiations. Yeah.
Just to be clear, what Ryan is talking about is in a consensus building format, it is a stand aside. If a party says, I cannot consent to this, at the same time, I will not block it. And Amber, I would like a verbal from you. You are saying that you do not approve. You would stand aside to let the current revisions be adopted. Is that correct?
That's correct. I think the understanding is what Ryan and Tom had just, if we could add some language at the bottom that explains why we are on the record as being in disagreement, but we don't want to block it moving forward. So
Okay.
isn't that what Oregon did in their last year, basically?
Yes.
Let's
So-
turn to Yakima Nation. Does that change anything for you? And it may not. So this should be a free decision for you about how you want to proceed. And for people on the phone, we're just giving them a few minutes to confer. Go ahead, Lorraine.
Yep. Okay, there we go. Yeah, we're still in, I guess, concerned about, I'm not saying that we're entirely in disagreement because I do agree that yes, safety is, I'm not objecting to that in any capacity. But just with the concerns going forward and I guess the question I have is, you say, well, we'll go and we'll meet at the HAB level but I just want to make sure that we're involved at every angle because there's times when people meet behind the door and then you just come and tell us, there's always well, yeah, there's this, but I don't want to hear that, going forward. I want to make sure that we're going to be engaged and able to participate. And I know that, yeah, we do have those meetings, but, hearing that there's other people that are being involved in the discussion. And if we're not able to be present during that same discussion, that's my concern. So as far as this, if you add that language to it, then, I agree that, yes, let's go forward with it with the understanding that coming back in December, that it's still going to be something that is, we're looking at a remedy.
And here, let me check my understanding. What I thought I heard Carrie say is that this continuation of this item would first come in a discussion with the tribes. So you would be leading that discussion in negotiations with DOE and the right programmatic people. And then what comes out of that would be brought back to the HAB. And I don't think there would be any point really other than internal team discussions that they would have. But it sounds like the tribes would be intricately involved in this item?
Yes, so we would have the discussions at the meeting with the appropriate programmatic staff. And just like I expect you would possibly go back and talk with your superiors. I can't guarantee we're not going to have to go back and talk to headquarters, but I don't anticipate something different.
So with that understanding that the tribes would help lead that discussion, each party going back for internal conference and caucus, coming back together and developing language for presentation in December, are you standing aside so that current revisions to the document can be adopted pending a third revision to address those items, correct?
So can you provide clarification regarding your, what you just said regarding presentation, bringing a presentation to the board?
Bringing it back to the board, the
Okay.
language back to the board.
Okay,
My bad.
that was a misunderstanding on my
Evil
behalf.
facilitator. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Lorraine.
I just said we agree.
Okay, so
Thank you.
Okay, and I'm not even going to try and repeat all of that. I'm hoping that Josh has got it cleanly for the minutes.
It's recorded.
And it's recorded. But pay attention to the minutes when you see the draft. Yes, Tom.
So the correct term, I think, is consensus with abstention.
Thank you. So we're moving towards consensus with abstention of the Rev 2 current revision changes to the committee descriptions. Do we have any dispute to that? If I've got everybody's, Steve is good.
for those on the phone, somebody pretended to flip their name tag up. All right.
Is there, let's just make sure, is there anybody online that does not concur with that path forward? Okay. Sounds like we've got a path forward. We have an adopted version of the committee descriptions. And at this point, yes.
I want to open it all back up. No.
Don't you dare.
No, I did want to say thank you to everyone for the great conversation. Very much appreciated.
I totally agree with that. Thank you. And let's take a break.
This calls for zucchini bread, if ever a moment. Yes. When do you want to reconvene? 10:30? Okay, we're going back to the schedule. We're a few minutes extra for the break. We will reconvene at 10:30. For those online, we'll give a 2-minute warning. Thanks for hanging with us and working towards resolution.
Good morning. It is 10:30. Let's get back to business. Next up on the agenda is to discuss the fiscal year 24 work plan. And I think Rob Davis was promised by Lindsay to be the first up for any question.
I did. Rob, did you have anything else that you wanted to add from yesterday about the work plan? Or do we want to, before we get started, because then my recommendation is to go committee by committee. Okay. So Judy, if you could scroll down to what I have as page 8. I believe is, oh, you're on 11. Got a little excited there. So Ryan and I did a brief overview of the work plan yesterday, And so, oh, you're all the way down. Okay. Okay, there you go. Committee outreach and engagement. So this is the new committee for the PIC. And I don't believe we have Tracy or Michelle here. They both were at the leadership workshop and reviewed what we have on here. Around the table, is there anybody who thinks that there's anything missing from this committee or would like anything added?
Michelle is online. Michelle, do you have anything to say?
Hi, all. Between Tracy and I know we don't have anything new to say or add as far as our committee is concerned for the work plan. We're good with what's there, but are open if there are committee members that have other things they'd like to see added there.
And I just want to add that the milestone updates, I did take that back, and DOE is committed to having those conversations. Mia, I think you had your table 10 out.
Yeah, I don't know if you said it already, but these aren't, I mean, these are kind of a bit higher level topics, and we can do smaller topics within these that maybe aren't written down in the work plan. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you for providing that clarification. So these are just kind of the overarching topics that will kind of start that conversation. So if there's something specific or emerging that comes about that the group wants to discuss, then I think a conversation needs to be had and we can look at planning our agendas appropriately.
Seeing no other hands virtually, or actually I see a comment. Let me make sure that nobody said anything. Okay, we're good. So next one was the Cleanup and Risk Mitigation Committee, which again, we briefly went over yesterday, but does anybody have any concerns or anything they want to add or discuss? Feel free to raise your tents if you have any. Rob?
Pointing out that on the second page there for that committee of the waste, WESF, that was a presentation made to the tanks committee recently on the WESF, and that if this committee is going to take that, could it be a joint with tanks or something like that?
I don't think the WESF was at tanks, was it? I thought that was at RAP.
I believe it did come to the RAP committee, but if the tanks committee is interested in discussing WESF, then I think it's absolutely something that
A joint.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that with both committees.
Good.
Like we've done that in the past where the tanks committee would be invited to a topic that could be considered cross-cutting, and I think it's appropriate to do so here.
Thank you.
That was the WESF.
Waste encapsulation storage facility.
Go ahead, Tom, you have something to share.
I'm wondering if we wanted to talk about the adaptive milestones process and the tool that was used in that place in England, Sellafield, that's being used in the adaptive milestones process. Would that fit under milestone updates, or does that need its own line item?
You know, I don't know the answer to that, so I can take that back and put that request in for the board.
Thanks.
Chris?
Under informational briefings, I'd like to see an addition of 61811 on there.
And Tom and I were talking a little bit about that offline. I don't have an answer for that one just because that's not something that was brought forward previous to just a few minutes ago for me. And so let me take that back. And if for some reason it is not something that I'll have an answer to for you today, that could be something that could be considered an emerging topic. It could be added at that time.
Or it could also be covered under groundwater if we needed to.
Just gonna ask. I was gonna try to double duty here and text the SME to see if we could add that, but I will do that at lunch. Okay, so the next committee we have is the Land Use Infrastructure, Waste Disposition and Safety. So again, we do have 2 items identified here for advice. The true waste, which we have, the board has a head start on, and as well as the Hanford site-wide permit 9A. Rib. Again, these are very overarching topics. All right, oh, Becky?
Yeah, I understand that these are all overarching topics, and I believe in the leadership workshop we talked about. Because we've also been working on the traffic safety and written a couple pieces of advice for that. Since that time, they have put in a roundabout out at that intersection. That was a huge problem that we had written advice about as well. So, I don't, it doesn't have to be listed in here, but I want to make sure that that's something that we follow up on.
I agree with that.
Okay.
And Ryan, do you have any concerns about adding traffic safety in?
No, I think that's great.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to tank waste stewardship and treatment. Does anybody have any additions, questions, comments, concerns? Rob, I do see your name is raised.
Yes, I would like to make sure we add surface barriers under that topics. And then another one is the AMP system.
And I think you're getting your surface barriers
Next.
briefing in
That's it.
September. So let me ask to see if that's something that we'll continue to provide a briefing on for you.
Okay,
Um,
okay. Yeah, the surface barriers are kind of important now.
Okay. Yeah, you guys are getting that in September. And I'll also look into the amps.
And then just the lessons learned comment that I made, that it's lessons learned from LAW to be applied to HLW.
Yep, I've got that. Lessons learned from LAW to HLW. Judy, do you have that? Perfect. Thank you.
Super duper. And we're real excited for our next year. Got a lot of good topics. Thank you.
Oh, Dan?
Yes, the tank waste and stewardship treatment, I think it's tank closure, including in that tank closure, we should take a look at where DOE is in the WIR process for waste management area C or A, I forget which one it is they were considering.
Okay, I'll take that request back.
Okay. Area C.
Dan, can you repeat that for Judy so she can capture it on screen?
Yes, the waste incidental to reprocessing process that we've been going through on tank closure for waste management area C, where that is.
Thank you. We'll translate at break. You're good.
Okay, and last one, committee of the whole, which again, that was advice on Hanford site cleanup priorities. Again, Rev 9, the Hanford site-wide permit, and comprehensive land use plan / long-term stewardship, and that would be update informational. Does anybody have anything to add, questions, concerns on committee of the whole? Rob, is your name still raised for tanks, or do you got one for committee of the whole?
No, well, Kraut is going to be the real topic that we got to get consensus, and combining that with, sorry. I think that the issue on grout and is going to be a really a tough topic to convince the entire board to further some advice supporting the grout. And so we need some good technical discussions on how it works. Why does it work? Why do we feel confident it works? What the overpack is, what the deal is about a grout waste form that gives us so much confidence that it's the right choice. Okay, as for the waste that it's designed to handle. So that could be either the a committee of the whole discussion, educational discussion, or it could be within the tanks committee.
Yeah, I think that might be more appropriate for the IM team that's working on grout and tanks. And I think we also only have, what, 2 committees of the whole in the next year?
As currently outlined, yes. And there is one more topic that I wanted to discuss for the committee of the whole, and it could potentially just be, it could be potentially the afternoon of our budget simulation or potentially the following day. I know that DOE is interested in bringing the updated Hanford site 5-year plan. And so I wanted to see if that's something, I know, Chris, you and I had a little bit of conversation before the meeting about that document and to see if it would be helpful. Tom?
So this is the 4th 5-year plan placemat. And I think one of the years DOE did an evening meeting that the HAB was invited to roll it out. So, you know, in addition to, we're already going to be writing advice based on it. But if it's already going to be rolled out, maybe in an evening session on the day of the committee of the whole with the public, as opposed to just making it HAB.
Okay, so you're recommending for that evening public meeting for it to coincide with a HAB, like the HAB week? Okay, I'll take that recommendation back to Jennifer Colburn. And then I wanted to provide additional clarification. I'm being told that 61811 won't be right for discussion in FY24. So I think it's something that we would just consider an emerging topic if it comes forward at that time. And Rob, do you have something else to add? That's. So it looks like I have the recommendations. Like I said, I could commit to the traffic safety ad. I'm going to look into the adaptive milestones for CARM. I'm also going to look into the WEIR process, AMPS, and surface barriers for the TWIST committee, and take the recommendation for the Hanford site 5-year plan evening meeting to coincide with the full board. I'm not the full board, but committee week in October. So the path forward is, does the group, well, this is your process. So does the group, you know, want to move forward with providing consensus as or with the document as is, with the understanding that this is a living document, and I do have those requests that we can, you know, further discuss at the December board meeting. Go ahead.
Yesterday, I wrote down in my notes that somebody had suggested that we try to attach another column here with the milestones that these activities are associated with. Is that too much work?
I think that's going to be a heavy lift for me at this time. I don't know how quickly I can make that happen, but I can take that recommendation back.
Okay, okay. Well, Ryan can do it just like that. I know that. But that was a good, so whoever suggested it, that was a great suggestion.
So do we, oh, sorry, Pam.
I believe you've asked if we're ready to proceed. So I would like to make a motion that we approve the draft work plan.
And I just want to make sure, Rob, you up or down?
I'm done.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so a request has been made for consensus on the fiscal year 24 work plan as written right now, with the minor tweaks that Lindsay's going to make to it, because we're adding traffic safety and I think that are in the.
There's the traffic safety that I can commit to adding, as well as the milestone updates. And then I committed to going back and looking into the other recommendations and bringing that information back to you in December. Tom?
Did we make the edits to the calendar and words So it was consistent with the calendar that we approved yesterday?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. So that's already noted. I think that's actually updated in my version, but
Probably not mine.
not yours. Unless you brought up the,
Oh,
oh, you got August. Should be 24, 25, 26. Nope, nope, scroll down.
no, just,
It's the 24th.
this is the
Oh.
one I've been working on and I have
Okay.
not
No,
updated.
just kidding. Gotta scroll up to page 6. It was October.
Yeah.
Yep,
Oh, there we go.
that's correct. That's the correct version. Yeah, I noticed that going through it, so I appreciate your patience with my error.
So do we have consensus? Does anybody disagree with moving forward with this version of the fiscal year 24 work plan?
Yep, here.
That was
yeah.
approved yesterday.
Yes. Everybody thumbs up. There's no disagreement. No abstains. We're good. Success. Congratulations. Okay, so we're ahead of schedule a little bit. How about if we start some of the committee reports? And then we have a hard stop at 11:15 for public comment. So
Can I step in just for a second? Does the group want to power through the rest of the agenda and I guess get through everything before lunch? Okay.
So just to clarify, Lindsay, that if we start on this, break hard at public comment, reconvene, pick up again at 11:30 and just work through to conclusion. Is that right?
If that works for the group, does that work for the group? Jan, does that work for you?
I have a hard lunch appointment at 11:45. And so I would have come back. But you know, it's a lot of the business that you're going to be conducting later on today that maybe won't apply to me. So I'm perfectly okay for people to get out early.
Thank you. And we hope you enjoy your lunch appointment.
Yep, looks like Michelle's hand is raised as well. Thank you, Jan.
Yes, I just want to double check with Tracy, who was prepared to give our committee report today, and I am not, that she was going to join us after lunch because she had a meeting conflict today. So I'm just trying to quickly check with her and see if powering through is going to be an issue for her.
Thank you, Michelle.
Okay, thanks. And of course, we could add that item last. So see when she might be available. Thank you. Great.
okay, committee reports. Who wants to go first? Don't okay, BCC up.
So the BCC committee report. On September 13th, we'll be having the last BCC meeting because can you hear me now? On September 13th, we'll be having the last BCC meeting. After that, October 1st, it fades away into the sunset, not to exist. So this is going to be a long BCC meeting, and I think a pretty good one. And it will feature topics of interest to the entire HAB, not just the BCC. We're going to have 3 one-hour presentations. The first will be on prime contracts, and it will be a question and answer, informal type discussion. And so everybody interested in the contracting process, please consider attending and please bring questions. It will stress more Hanford contracts rather than general contracts. The second topic I think, which is critical to work priority advice going forward. We'll learn how the integrated priority list is constructed, how it's developed, because I think as we learned last year, DOE, instead of having work scheduled for under the river corridor, under the Central Plateau, it's in a category called risk mitigation or something like that. But those topics under risk mitigation, the works under risk mitigation, come out of the integrated priority list. And so if we know what's in the integrated priority list, if we know how it's developed, I think we'll be able to give better work advice. And the third topic is going to be on funding for Hanford. And Ecology is going to give a presentation on all the work that they've been doing to try and increase funding for Hanford. I think, as everybody here knows, it doesn't matter what work goes in the 5-year plans, what work gets done. If you don't have the funding, you can't do it. So this is kind of this is an important presentation. So all three of those presentations, we've talked about that in past years, but this is the first time we've ever been able to get a presentation on contracts, at least since I've been in the HAB. One on the integrated priority list and one on funding. So I think that'll be of interest to everybody in the HAB, not just BCC members. To finish up the BCC committee, the last hour, the majority of it, I'd like to discuss, I'd like a roundtable discussion, thoughts from everybody. Are there ways to improve the work priority advice? There's been a lot of email discussion back and forth. And I think there's been some pretty good ideas. For example, and I'll just throw this out, the 5-year plan update for the last several years has formed the basis for our work priority cleanup advice. But in a sense, that's after the fact. The 5-year plan is something that's already been agreed upon. It follows the EM strategic 10-year plan. And so it's sort of when we put items in the 5-year plan, say this is what we think we ought to prioritize, we're sort of already agreeing with what's written. And one possibility is, could we get involved in the development of the 5-year plan? Give priority advice earlier on in the process rather than later on in the process. And there's been other ideas that have floated up too. So what I'd like to get out of that part of the discussion, maybe something for the HAB leadership to consider going forward. I don't think we can do anything about cleanup priorities for FY26, but maybe we could start a discussion on ways to improve it from the FY27 cleanup priority advice going forward. And then lastly, since this is the last BCC meeting, I'd like to end with kind of a little bit of a celebration or a wake, depending on your wording, with some cake for everybody attending, just as a farewell to the BCC. So we're looking at about 4 to 4.5 hours, but I think it'll be of interest to everybody in the HAB, not just to BCC members. So this has been one of the topics of discussion between myself and Lindsay and Sue and Judy. That's taken up a little bit of time over the last several months.
Chris, I thank you for putting so much work into the BC and getting us a head start on this meeting in September. We're really excited for what we have to bring.
Esteban.
No, thank you, Chris. And like you said, and I lived in Indianapolis, and to quote Kurt Vonnegut, how it says, we'll go down in history as the first society that wouldn't save itself because it wasn't cost effective. And like Chris says, the big thing here that I know my term during the HAB and when we started, and we pushed for the senators in Washington to get the funding for, and I think a lot of time, because before I came out here, I was in Washington, D.C. And, and the big thing, work with a lot of environmental organizations. And like Chris said, if the funding is not there, definitely the work cannot be done. So I think it's beneficial to all HAB members and definitely to everybody to have that self-awareness and be conscious of that.
Pam.
Our Senator Murray chairs the Appropriations Committee in Congress and the Senate. And the House and the Senate both have, I think, 12 committees, and they adopt their budgets and they come together to reconcile. The Senate has not passed its budget since 1920, something like that. I mean, it's ridiculous. Her budgets are out, and the Department of Energy fared well. Not only cleanup, but energy, nuclear, new nuclear. It's just a remarkable budget. And so I think we're in a good position for the compromise that should occur before the beginning of the fiscal year. It's just as an aside. Could you tell us again the date and time of the budget meeting?
It's September 13th. It's on the calendar for FY 23. And Judy and I are working on times, but let's say it'll be tentatively from 9 to 11:30, then a lunch break, and say 1 to 3:30 or something like that.
Okay, thanks. And are we not going to do budget advice in the future since BCC goes away?
That would be up, I guess, to the HAB leadership, how we would do that. It could be done under the auspices of the COTW, or one of the other committees could say, this committee will sponsor an IM team on budget advice or something like that. So there'll have to be another avenue, Pam.
So Pam, I just want to add that EM complex wide cleanup priorities advice is being requested of every board. And so my recommendation is to continue to provide that, the Hanford site cleanup priorities advice. And we do have that budget simulation scheduled for October. And then we're also looking, like I said, at bringing that Hanford site 5-year plan placemat update, and then and providing time for an issue manager team to form and kick off that advice.
Tom.
Yeah, and then the thought was that the EIC or the ESC would be the sponsor of that advice because it is a cross-cutting and it affects every committee.
Steve.
Since this is a committee meeting, are we going to be able to get travelers to come? Are we going to be in person, or is this just going to be Zoom?
I think this will be in person.
It will be in person. We were planning on having,
This will be held in the Washington State University East Building, classroom 203, I believe. We will have owls and a Teams option.
I just wanted to make sure we encouraged out-of-town folks that they would be reimbursed for their travel in this committee meeting.
So that will be determined on if you are a member of that committee.
So please be a part of that committee.
Going around the table, Tom, wrap.
Okay, so RAP met in June, had a chock-a-block full meeting with 3 presentations from the agencies on 100K area remediation, 100K and N RAFS process, and the waste encapsulation storage facility progress. We also passed the transuranic advice that you saw yesterday out of committee, and we will be working on that continually. The next meeting that we have on the calendar was for September. Because RAP and the EIC decided that the 320 or the 324 building brief was more important than just RAP, and that brief got brought to this meeting. And the other topic on the agenda for September was infrastructure, and we have a new committee that's forming that incorporates infrastructure in October. We decided to cancel the RAP meeting in September. move that forward into the next fiscal year. I am inviting everybody though to have an after hours wake for not a wake, but after hours HAB event that is not HAB sanctioned to commemorate the success of the committee structure that we are metamorphosing from. I'm hoping to have like a bowling night or something, just to have remember that the HAB is supposed to be fun and it's supposed to be a community, not just work. So we're going to do that in September, and we will have the next CARM meeting in January.
Going around the table, Pam, National Liaison.
I had a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry, Todd. Okay.
It's more fun if instead of non-sanctioned, you say it's unsanctioned. Seems more rebellious.
Okay, my report is 7 pages long and I'm not gonna give you the whole thing, but I have sent it to Josh so he can make it part of the record. So I pulled together a variety of topics from around the complex that I think you may be interested in. The first one, the Department of Energy has kicked off a Cleanup to Clean Energy initiative and an innovative effort to repurpose parts of DOE-owned lands, portions of which were previously used in the nation's nuclear weapons program, into sites of clean energy generation. DOE will explore opportunities to lease federal land for the build-out of utility-scale clean energy projects. Cleanup to Clean Energy will help achieve ambitious climate goals for agencies to use their properties for the development of new clean energy generation. So 70,000 acres have been identified for potential development at the following sites: Hanford, Idaho, Nevada, Savannah River, and the Waste Isolation Pilot Plant. There is a piece of land that was congressionally transferred to the community from the Hanford site, but use of land formerly part of Hanford is very challenging. So it's not easy. And Steve has been an observer of that through the TRIDEC processes. So I wish them luck. That'd be a good idea, but it's not going to be easy. Okay, this was a fun story from the Savannah River site. This year, 180 students participated in the summer internship program, up from 117 previously. Students engaged in a variety of disciplines within SRNS, including engineering, computer science, safety, business services, and information technology. From the first day, the interns were fully engaged. They brought fresh energy and ideas and viewpoints, and it was exciting to see in a full capacity. By offering full-time positions to nearly 50 of the 180 students, SRS is going to close gaps and positively impact the SRS future. Around the complex, they're having trouble filling positions, so putting interns into full-time positions is a great idea. Okay, this is a story from Los Alamos, and those of you that have been around a while, this will make you think about our vertical pipe units that were at 61810 Burial Ground. Efforts to address legacy transuranic waste took an important step forward at EM's Los Alamos office. They have begun to size reduce activities to prepare a portion of waste for permanent disposal. They're preparing corrugated metal pipes, like 61810, containing transuranic waste for shipment and disposal at EM's to the WIP facility in New Mexico. Crews recently began cutting the first retrieved pipes using hydraulic shears so that the pieces could be loaded into containers known as standard waste boxes. The waste comes from a former Los Alamos radioactive liquid waste treatment facility that operated during the Cold War. Each pipe measured 20 feet long and weighed between 10,000 and 14,000 pounds. So They didn't handle it the same way we did. We suggested to them that they take a look at the 61810 experience. They just cut the pipe up and put it in boxes versus what we did. Okay, so this is from the Savannah River site. Savannah River site also has tank waste. They have been vitrifying their high level waste for I think about 20 years. And they grout their low activity waste and they put it in these gigantic circular sort of buildings. They're absolutely huge. The revised roadmap for completion of tank waste program at Savannah River is now available. The system plan integrates and outlines the activities required for the disposition of existing and future high-level radioactive waste and the removal from service of radioactive liquid waste tanks and facilities belonging to the SRS site. It records a planning basis for waste processing in the liquid waste system through the end of the program mission. DOE has worked cooperatively to plan for accelerated, aggressive performance in waste processing. The updated SRS system plan outlines several production improvements that increase the feed and processing rates. Overall, they're forecasting the best possible outcome for dispositioning the remaining 34 million gallons of tank waste. And they list the various facilities and initiatives that they've undertaken. Also new to the SRS plan is the incorporation of the newly developed liquid waste system modeling to identify process or facility improvements most likely to accelerate the liquid waste mission. The contractor's goal is to complete the liquid waste mission by 2037. They will continue to put safety first and use the system plan to move forward with the treatment of radioactive liquid waste in a manner that is responsible and meets mission goals. Oak Ridge kicks off landfill expansion project. This is fascinating to me because the people that live in the Oak Ridge area did not want a new landfill. They wanted their waste to go someplace else. And DOE said, nope, it's staying there. So they've made progress here. They are in final permitting of landfill 5, which will accept sanitary, industrial, and construction waste generated from cleanup at the site. With an expansion of 5 acres of land, it will provide almost 500,000 yards of disposal space. That equates to approximately 50,000 dump truck loads of additional capacity. The landfill will play a vital role in supporting cleanup efforts to extend the ability to use it for another 15 to 20 years. Oak Ridge is also nearing the start of early site preparation for its environmental management disposal facility, which is slated to begin operation in the 2020s. It will provide an additional 2.2 million yards of waste disposal capacity. So then in the report, I included an article that was published by DOE headquarters about the National Academy study that was done to take a look at Hanford tank waste and look at the options that might be available. The National Academy did 2 previous studies that did not have any recommendation associated with it. Congress told them to do another one and to give a recommendation. The recommendation is that only grout-based alternatives allow for the near-term disposition of low-activity tank waste that achieves the fastest reduction of risk of potential tank leaks. It also notes that grout-based alternatives are clearly executable at benchmarking funding levels and have the highest probability of success. That's for low-activity waste, obviously. Okay, so this is another story about Los Alamos. They have accomplished 7, oh, this is interesting. They do annual milestones at Los Alamos. They have accomplished 7 of 14 2023 Appendix B milestones. Each year, the DOE and the Department, it's the equivalent of the Department of Ecology in New Mexico, agreed to update the Appendix B for the current year. And these are enforceable and targets are identified for the next 2 years that are not yet enforceable. And this article, if you want to look at it, identifies those milestones that they've developed. Okay, this is my last topic. Y12 is being torn down at Oak Ridge. This was their gigantic, excuse me, let me just read it. EM crews have completed major deactivation efforts on a Manhattan Project era facility at the Y12 National Security Complex. They are also completed cleanup efforts this month at the multi-story former uranium enrichment facility spanning 325,000 square feet. Deactivation and demolition work at Oak Ridge presents unique challenges amid ongoing missions. This is the site where DOE's uranium program is located. So there's ongoing very high security for that uranium facility. And in my several visits to Oak Ridge, they take you in a bus up on a hill and going down. That's as close as you get. Okay, that's my report for this time. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
I have a
Okay,
question.
got a question?
Is the HAB sending anybody to the ECA's cleanup workshop in DC?
I am attending remotely.
Okay.
I will be, no, it's paid for and I will be doing it at home. Okay, we've got 11:12. Becky, you're up. Are you? Oh, sorry, Jan has a question, comment?
So at the last meeting, Pamela couldn't come, so I was asked to read the report. And Jeff, you had a comment that you were going to speak to Pamela. Have you done that? Would you do that now?
Hi, Pam. I'm sorry, I don't remember what my comment was.
I can remind you. The comment that you made was that you thought that maybe Pamela should edit her report so that it had things that were more relevant to your interests. Do you remember saying that?
How'd I do today?
Very well, thank you.
Glad I'm improving.
So we've got public comment right now.
Okay, Becky, I don't want to interrupt you when you get rolling. It is 11:13 and we have a hard stop at 11:15 on the calendar, on the agenda for public comment. So I'm throwing it to you, your choice. You can either roll with it now and then stop or wait until after public comment.
This is going to come as a major surprise, but I don't have a whole lot to say. So I think we can meet the time limit. Okay. Well, our committee hasn't even really met, so there's not a lot to cover unless they met while I was off and I was not aware of that.
I believe there was a joint meeting, but I think you and I need to touch base to make sure that we are planning appropriately going into FY24.
Okay. Perfect, but we can do that. And I'm looking at the calendar here and it looks like January 8th, we are slated to meet of 2024. So yeah, we can do some planning on that. What needs to be, what we want to talk about, cover.
Yep, that sounds good. And I know that we did have the EOC tour while you were out as well.
We did the what?
The EOC tour, Emergency Operations Center.
Oh yeah,
That
yeah.
did happen.
And I wasn't there for that.
No, you were not.
Yeah, I was home nursing my wounds still. So licking my wounds. I did have one thing I wanted to share. There are a lot of, if anybody in this room has a burning desire to be a worker at Hanford, there are some NCO positions open right now. Those are nuclear chemical operator positions. And there's 25 of them currently posted. And keep your eye out if you have kids or grandkids. As Pam said, we're having a hard time finding workers on the Hanford site, especially like NCOs, D&D workers, pipe fitters, electricians, radcon technicians. So they have been doing several trainee classes. Each trainee class for the rad context anyway are approximately 20 to 25 people. They bring them in, they're being paid while they're doing it. It's about 4 months worth of training, classroom training, testing, and then they go out to the field, and that's where they get their on the job training. And for about a year before we actually kind of set them free, not really on their own, but to go out and really start working. We have an aging workforce. And I'm done.
Thank you. Well, I need a stress ball to kind of set in that way. I'm turning it over to Judy for public comment.
To the microphone that works. Can I see a show of hands of people who would like to provide public comment? Jerry, I have you on the list, so please come up. Make sure the mic works.
Thank you. Jerry Paulette for Heart of America Northwest. Every decision about Hanford cleanup relates to the lands that are the ceded lands of the Umatilla and Yakima nations and the treaty rights of the Nez Perce, Yakima, and Umatilla nations along the river corridor. There is not a decision at Hanford that does not directly affect those treaty rights. Every decision is about the lands that were ceded by those tribes to which they retain treaty rights. In addition, under the National Historic Preservation Act, they retain rights to preserve and have the agencies required to consider cultural properties, from archaeological properties to resources such as plants. Not acknowledging this at the beginning of every meeting has been an insult that does not go unnoted. As many of you know, every summer I bring a group of tribal law students to advisory board meetings. We did this spring to committee meeting. One of them was observing yesterday. The discussion, in their view, is racist and blatant. When you say that a governmental entity, a sovereign nation, can have its concerns raised at the table, but not recognized in the scope of the committee work and the work of the board, it may not occur to you that that is racist, but in the eyes of people who are listening, it is. A tribe is not a public interest group. It is not just another stakeholder. And in the charter of this board, that was recognized, and tribes were given choice that they could either be governmental entities as ex officio members of the board or sit at the table with voting rights. But it was recognized no matter what they chose, they were sovereign nations. Now, the state of Washington adopted the HEAL Act, and it creates a new obligation on the Department of Ecology to consider an environmental justice assessment on every agency action that may have a disparate impact on vulnerable populations and overburdened communities, which include all three tribes and their members and the Wanapum band. In the discussions for creation of that and the Environmental Justice Council and HEAL Act and ecology's obligations, it was expected and stated that boards like this would be utilized when they have tribal representation to assess whether or not there should be an environmental justice assessment for any decision. Any decision that leaves contamination along the Columbia River for 200 years to decay has a disparate impact on treaty rights. I don't have a right to use the shorelines of the Columbia River. 9 out of 10 of you around the table don't have it right. But when you say that we're going to leave contamination in place and it won't be safe to utilize that area for 200 years, there is one entity sitting at the table and 2 other entities that are sovereign nations whose rights are disparately affected. And if they do exercise those treaty rights, they will have hundreds of times greater exposure than is considered in the cleanup plans. Those are the types of considerations that should be on the table and in the work plan of every committee and formally recognized. And I fear that ecology will have to find another venue because you do have an obligation under the HEAL Act to have consultation and consideration of an EJ impacts of every decision that might affect resources on the Hanford site, including residual contamination, say, for a cleanup plan along the Columbia River that leaves contamination in place for 200 to decay, or an upland decision on the Central Plateau that may affect groundwater or plant life. And the Energy Department cannot say with a straight face that it is interested in Justice 40 initiative and cannot say with a straight face that you're interested in creating diversity on this board when you come back after a day of consideration and say, you can talk about treaty rights and those historic, the disparate impacts on your health. You can just raise them like any other stakeholder, but we are not going to put them in a convening document and work scope. You see how that flies in the face of Justice 40, of a commitment to diversity. It's been horrible to watch this today. And it's been, I think, shameful for, certainly for those people who are going to be impacted and have rights. And I urge you to think long and hard about this as you.
Thank you. And just one last call for any other public comment. With that, back to you, Madam Chair.
Becky, did you have anything else you wanted to, since I cut you off? Okay. Jan, what time did you have to bail?
I'll be leaving in 5 minutes or so.
Okay, so before we get to tanks, one of the important things we wanted to do is recognize those members that are departing the board as of the end of September. Yes, we celebrated the new members, but I also want to take a few minutes to celebrate those that are leaving us, who have been a valuable participant in addition to the board over the years. Lindsay gave me this nice list. Yep. So Aaron Brake from Benton Franklin Council of Governments, Tom Galeotto, who was here yesterday, we're missing him today, from Tridec, Jean Van Loo and Paul Keeson from the Richland Rod and Gun Club, Denise Jones and Todd Martin from Citizens for a Clean Eastern Washington, Jan Cottrell from League of Women Voters, Mason Murphy from Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Jack Bell from the Nez Perce Tribe, Dan Solitz, Dan, thank you, from Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board, Shannon Cram from University of Washington, Jessica Ray, also from the University of Washington, Alan Felsot from Washington State University, Martin Valdez from Public at Large, Esteban, thank you. I'm going to miss you actually, from Public at Large, and Luann Ayers, who has been online, also Public at Large. You will all be missed, not just Esteban, but please, if, you know, thank your fellow board members for their service to the Hanford Advisory Board. And if you would like to make any comments, please feel free. Jan?
Great fun was had by all. Keep up the good work.
And I want to reiterate the thank you for your service. And we do hope to see you all in September. Esteban? Sorry, Dan, I skipped you.
It's been a pleasure serving, and I'd just like to, as my parting comment, this is my third consensus organization, and I just wanted to make a comment that every time consensus is blocked, the consensus process gets stronger. So keep up the consensus. Thank you.
And like I said, because I've worked throughout government and nonprofit work doing this work, and more than anything, working for communities that were not represented in diverse communities. And I think one of the biggest thing and one of the biggest challenges is that I think you need to appreciate that things are hard, and more than anything, you know, you got Native communities present, unlike in other parts of this country. And more than anything, other diverse communities that need to be educated about what's going on. And more than anything, I think hope that everybody becomes conscious and self-aware that this work is not easy, and that in order for everybody to get this work done, it needs to be in community, and people need to do outreach, especially for the workers, because like I think like Rebecca said, it is hard work. You know, the people don't want to do this work because they know the health and safety hazards. And more than anything, what's happening along the Columbia River, which I think it's a big, huge natural resource that everybody enjoys and needs to be definitely conscious and know what's happening to it. Thank you.
I was just going to echo my thank you beyond Susan and Lindsay from Ecology. Thank you, everybody that served on the board.
And tell your friends.
Okay, and I do want to remind all of our departing members that they are still welcome to attend committee meetings and participate as members of the public. So your input is still considered valuable. So please, if you're not on the interested parties list with Josh to get the information, please follow up with him. But you are still valuable members of, I'm going to say, the HAB alumni. As Lindsay says, class of 2023. So thank you. So it is 11:29. Jan, don't want to interfere, but we'll now continue with TWC. Thanks. Committee meeting. Committee report. Rob?
Again, thank you, Jan. All the retiring members, thanks a lot for your help. Okay, the tanks committee. We have 17 permanent members and 7 unofficial members, total of 24. That have been attending pretty regular our tank waste committee meetings. So thank you all for that. Some of the activities that we covered last year ended up with some requests from us to take a look at the system plan. And unfortunately, we did not see a system plan last year. And so that's one of the questions is when do we expect to see our system plan? We did talk a lot about tank integrity. We had several presentations from the scientists that work in tank integrity. In particular, we had some excellent presentations and visuals given, and we wrote a thank you letter, I believe, to the department for being so. Coming up, we have moved the date of the Tank Waste Committee to September. You can see that on the new calendar for the committee meeting. It's really a topic that we have been asked to take a look at for a while. It's these temporary covers that are going over the tank farms and to lens the water away from further driving any of the waste that is built into the ground. And so that'll be the main topic of discussion at that point. We have some activities coming up involving taking again, we're going to get some updates on the melter and the melter operation. We'll get some updates on retrievals. The test bed initiative is very interesting, and we'll continue to follow that. We've been asked to offer some advice on what we feel about grouted waste and shipping it off site. So we do have a full, also, last note I got here was to add the tank closure. Some of the real interesting things having to do with the new modular Tisker operation or the new construction of the AMP system. It's pretty exciting what they're going to do with that and make it certainly a lot safer. Other than that, I hope to see you all at the next meeting, and that's probably about a very short wrap up. Everybody wants to go to lunch.
Yes, Jeff.
Thanks, Rob. Wanted to make a plug for the October Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board meeting. It's October 10th and 11th. We're going to be meeting at the LIGO facility. Did I say that right? LIGO. And the theme is going to be technology. So thanks DOE and Ryan for contributing to that. And then on the second day, the half day, we're going to do a tour of the B reactors. So you're all invited.
Okay, last committee. Michelle, you still there to do pick?
And Michelle is stepping in. Tracy wasn't available until after lunch, so we appreciate that Tracy's report got emailed over and Michelle is ready to fill in.
Okay, well, thanks to Tracy. I'll breeze through her report here. First, just a reminder, the PIC encourages outreach and engagement between the TPA agencies and the community at large. We create opportunities for communication and dialogue and explore community values, concerns, public health and safety issues, public involvement strategies, and effective information transfer. And the committee also evaluates if advice should be recommended. So short-term activities, improvements for the TPA public involvement calendar, including suggestions for the use of QR codes, Spanish version translation, and closed comment periods to comment responses in the administrative record. Explore bringing back the state of the site events, which Lindsay indicated is an ongoing discussion, to supplement the HAB meetings where TPA agencies can provide those high-level presentations to the general public as a strategy to increase public awareness. We would like to be focusing on increasing general public awareness and attendance at HAB meetings. So one idea, for example, was something like HAB Jeopardy or HAB Candyland, something, the note says, make HAB fun again. Incorporate social events like dinners, social hours, etc., into HAB meetings. It was increase a sense of HAB community and encourage further public involvement. Develop a survey on the regional meeting in Yakima to determine feedback for what worked and what didn't work, being that this was the first time we'd done an out-of-town meeting in a while. HAB orientation, again, using that same HAB Jeopardy type idea to familiarize new members with the HAB and help them feel more comfortable with a more lighthearted approach. Also incorporating informal social events around orientation, and help to determine the location for the next regional HAB meeting. Long-term looking ahead, let's see here. What advice was issued on state of the site meetings? HAB advice number 293 in the past before determining a path forward with that. This will be on the agenda for the September PIC meeting. Revisit the state of the site type events. New member orientation is coming up in October. We'll survey new members on thoughts and interests, what aligns with the PIC. This is an opportunity to let new members know what the PIC is. The Rev 9A permit in the September meeting, Ecology will share some initial public involvement materials. We talked about some baseball card type pieces for committee feedback, and the committee will be ready to provide additional thoughts or suggestions if desired. Regarding holistic negotiations, the committee may be invited to provide some feedback or suggest suggestions related to that public comment period. And again, just expanding outreach through HAB member organizations and newsletters, meeting notices on city calendars, materials at visitor centers and tribal visitor centers, for example. And then environmental justice. That's something that the committee intends to look at in the future and see what, if any, advice can be provided around that topic. I appreciate the references and information from the public comment period about that. It is part of the 24 work plan for the PIC, and a topic that we would like to have more information on. And then a possible IM team on public outreach, using technology in a virtual tour, and what outreach activities are being conducted by the TPA agencies and Hanford contractors. So those are all kind of the longer range view. I did make a note yesterday about the comment to engage on the website upgrades that will be coming. So I am sure that that's something we'll be exploring and looking at the PIC. And Maya's comment even about just making sure we have a sign out when we're having the meeting. So those are some things we'll continue to watch for as well.
Thanks, Michelle. Great job stepping in. Does anybody have any questions? Seeing none? Chair.
So the next item on the agenda is introduction to the new HAB committees. Now, I know we've talked quite a bit over the last couple of days about the new HAB committees. Is there anything that anyone wants to say, provide, comment on, or can we just move past that topic?
Can I just make one recommendation, and that is if you have not selected your committees, if you could do that with the facilitation team as we go into the new fiscal year. So today, or send them over an email, that would be helpful.
Good point.
Oh, do we all need to pick new committees?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
By the way, color-coded sign-up sheets. So I'll pause just for a minute. As you go out, if you could remember your name tag, maybe put them down by the committee sheets as you're signing up. Like I took mine home yesterday, don't need it. But if you could return your name tag, sign up as you step out, that would be fantastic.
Okay, so next on the agenda is other/new.
Susan, Mia had a comment, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Mia.
Lindsay, could you just clarify for us, because I think it was confusing around the time when Gary and Mike were around and the committees were restructuring, how travel is going to work for the new committees and between, primary, how many committee meetings can they attend and permission?
Sure. So as far as travel goes, each member of the board can select up to 2 committees and travel will be reimbursed for those 2 committees. Tom, you have a look.
Yeah, so that's, so we're going back to that, because what happened,
Correct.
what happened at the end there was, it was stated that one member from each seat could attend every committee meeting. Is that not accurate anymore?
That is not accurate anymore. There seemed to be a miscommunication. And so it's a way to manage our HAB travel budget. And so that's where we need to, oh, Mia.
I just have a clarifying question. Since PIC was always the freebie committee, is that still, so it would be PIC, it's always free to go to that and then 2 more, or is it 2 total?
So my understanding is that it is 2 total. However, you make a good point. So let me ask that question and then I'll make sure to respond via email so it's clear to everyone on the board. Ryan?
And this might be a question from Ryan to Lindsay, but is that only for traveling to meetings so they can still attend virtually to all the committee meetings? Is that right?
Yes, correct. That you'll just only be reimbursed for up to 2 committees.
Does that also include the ESC when you're asking about PIC or COE?
Yep, I will ask about that one as well.
Okay. We good for other new business? Other or new business? Michelle,
Thank
you got your
you.
hand up?
I did. Just related to the committee. Sorry, I have to put my hand up, take it down, look at me. Regarding the travel for committee meetings, I just want to clarify also committee meetings and virtual committee attendance. Because again, I also think that that is something that's a shift in most areas at this point, is the ability to participate in meetings virtually, as I am today. And how does that, if it does in fact impact committee participation related to travel?
I will ask that question.
Okay.
Okay, so I just want to provide additional clarification. So all of our committee meetings, or as they refer to them at the EM level, subcommittee meetings are open to the public, and members of the public are welcome to participate at that subcommittee level. Now, with that being said, if you are not a member of that specific committee and you want to participate virtually, if you are local and you want to just come participate, you are able to do so. However, you are not able to be a voting member of that committee. Does that provide more clarification? No.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And Lindsay, I thought I heard that HAB members could be members actually of any number of committees, but would only be reimbursed for travel for 2. Is that right? Or
So historically, and I'll look further into this, members were, HAB members were able to be members of committees, up to 2 committees and the PIC, and it served various, I guess, duties, right? So one of it was to manage the HAB travel budget, and the other one was to manage this perspective on the board. So we wouldn't have one stakeholder on every seat, right? Or on every committee. And just to make sure that we're getting that balanced viewpoint across all of the committees. But to provide that board balance.
thank you.
Lindsay, could we request to get that in writing, in particular, any differentiation between the members and the alternates?
And can you provide Jeff exactly what you'd like in writing as far as like the membership for travel?
Yes, and participation in voting rights on the committees.
Sure.
And I think additionally, this sort of whiplash between changing policies isn't helpful. So maybe that could be something we talk about at the EIC as well.
Absolutely. And so, there was some time where I stepped away from the board. So I think it's better for me to have a greater understanding of how things have progressed because there may be things that I'm missing. So I'm just going forward with how I understand things to date. But with that being said, there was a period of time where I wasn't involved, and I think a conversation continued after this is appropriate.
And in the interim of you moving off and back on, we had COVID and hybrid. So the
Yes, there were a lot of
introduction
changes.
of the hybrid option opened the doors to increased participation that was separate from travel budget discussions.
Right.
Yes, Rose.
Yeah, so with regards to committee membership, it seems to me that, I mean, I sign up to be on all of them just as an alternate. Lorraine's time is really limited but we need to know, as a tribal entity, we need to know what's going on in all of these committees. We have other people who will attend various meetings too, but I've actually signed up to be members of all of them. And are you telling me that I can't do that?
So I'm not saying that
Okay.
I committed to Jeff to going back and taking a look at
Okay.
what that looks like. Now, you could potentially be a member of all 4 committees. However, your travel will only be reimbursed for
Yeah.
2.
I don't usually travel. I mean, if I do, it's a day trip for
Okay.
us anyway. So I'm not worried about the travel part of it. I'm just worried about being able to participate.
Absolutely. And I
So-
think it's important for me to go back and to get that clarification.
Okay.
Understand that I have a firm path forward and make sure that's communicated in writing to the board so we're all on the same page.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody have other or new business? Well, you clicked.
Oh, and I only clicked for 1 second because I wanted to apologize if I did miscommunicate something. Like I said, I want to make sure that I'm giving you all the proper information and that that all of it is clear. Becky?
So this is a question about the other. I mentioned at the very beginning the fold out, the trifold deal. Hopefully we'll have that in the future outside of the doors so that the public knows where we are meeting. And also just a question about the sign-in sheet when we come in. Why the change to that? Where we used to have everybody's name, who the primary was, who the alternate was, who they represented. And now we just have a sheet that we sign in. It was helpful. It was helpful for me sometimes to go look at the sheet and because you can't see a lot of these, the name tags, like, because we do have a lot of new people. So it's helpful for me to go look at the sheet and go, oh, okay, this is who they represent, since I can't see that far. I'm an aging, workforce person too.
We can revisit, we'll go back and look at that. I just coming on, it was indicated to me that there have been a couple different iterations of sign-in sheets. This is a very generic one, that there was others for people to initial in. So we'll go back and look at that.
Okay, thank you.
And I was just going to say, I don't have a history onto why there was a transition for the sign-in sheets. Mia?
So I wanted in this time to bring up the agency's response to the cleanup priorities advice. And we've received advice or the response from DOE as well as ecology. We have still not received a response from EPA. And I want to just bring it before the board as specifically to DOE's response if we want to do a response to that. In the form of advice or maybe a letter. I don't know if that's possible, but I found it to be inadequate. It was 7 sentences long. And one of the sentences was just saying, I'm responding to this advice. And the last sentence was, you can contact me or Lindsay at this email. And so really 5 sentences responding to advice that Chris spent hours on and I mean days probably total. And so just wanted to open this discussion and see kind of how we want to, if we want to respond, and if so, how.
Jump in, Jeff. I know you're on this same topic.
Thank you. My suggestion, what I thought would be appropriate was for Susan just to send a letter to DOE and kind of outlining what our expectations are for a response, and then let DOE come back and, but rather than kind of hash it out in this context, set our expectations. Susan, you can do that for what we expect in a response from DOE, and then we can hash it out maybe in a future meeting.
Any other thoughts? What other thoughts? Tom, you're leading. Oh, sorry, Rob.
So we didn't really talk too much about the holistic negotiations yet in this meeting, other than bringing it up. Can we get an update on when we might expect to have something?
I'm going to punt this to Ryan.
I'm going to reiterate what Stephanie said yesterday. The agencies are currently drafting the proposed changes. That's as much as we can share. The hope is soon, but I can't offer a specific timeline. I'll just re-echo what Stephanie said yesterday.
And the system plan?
That one was another one where I know at the time, that was back originally at one of the summer Tank West committee meetings
Right.
when we were supposed to do. I'd heard from my SME that it just wasn't right for discussion yet, but potentially later this fall. I can follow up and see if that's still looking like a fall time kind of an update. So I'll follow up on that. And I'm sure that Lindsay could follow up with her system plan SME as well.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Thank you.
And before we go to Tom, so I kind of was looking into the committee list because I remember that on the HAB committee list, and this is going back to what Rose said, because Rose wondered if she could not participate if she was not necessarily a committee member. And so I'm not sure if you have the opportunity to review the committee member list, but specifically spelled out on the committee member list, we have the committee chairs, committee members, and what they call unofficial committee members or other interested parties. And underneath that, it states these are requests to be on committees that are over the 2 per seat limit, ex officio members and have leadership. So that's how it's currently set up. With that being said, I think that this warrants more discussion at the ESC. Sorry, my brain's got to shift to the new committee structure, but I just wanted to call that to your attention just to make sure that you understand that that was documented, but obviously open for conversation. Go ahead, Tom.
So going back to the response to cleanup priorities advice, there was recently guidance from DOE headquarters to local offices on how they should respond to EMSSAB board advice and recommendations. And that letter that we got did not meet muster for your own rules. So it might be worth, even without a letter from Sue, revisiting the response in context of your own headquarters guidance.
Okay, and I'm going to take all of the feedback back to Brian Vance and share what you guys have to say in today's meeting. It's my understanding, and this is my interpretation, that what was provided as your Hanford site cleanup priorities aligned with the Hanford 5-year plan. And so it may, I know that it was requested for a bullet by bullet response, but he chose not to respond via that manner because it did align with our priorities. And so I think it's important for you to share that feedback so I can take that back so we can take a look at addressing the response adequately for the next piece of advice that comes through. Pam?
In recent years, DOE has not been very interested in our budget thoughts and advice. Oh, is it a pat on the head kind of 7 sentences, or how would you characterize it?
Yes, it's a pat on the head. It's, yeah, supportive of the board and what the board does, but not responding specifically to the advice in any way, point by point, what we're asking for. And ecology, I found, did a much better job of kind of singling out certain points that we raised and responding to those. And so, and there's other models from other boards where specifically on cleanup priorities, where the DOE response is a point by point response. And I shared those with Lindsay as, well, these are examples of things we'd like to see.
Thank you.
I have a copy, Pam, if you want to see it.
Oh, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I also want on what Tom was saying as far as the Ike White headquarters direction. The DOE policies and procedures guide, aka the green sheet document that some of us know it as, also required states DOE written responses should include the following: a clear statement of acceptance or rejection of the recommendation in whole or in part. If the recommendation is accepted in whole or in part, a statement about how the changes will be implemented and in what time frame. And that was the piece that I passed on that would
you're
have
looking
helped.
for moving forward. Correct? That's what you're
Yep.
looking for. The
That
board is
and-
formally requesting that when DOE responds to HAB advice, that you're looking for either an acceptance and or a rejection or partial acceptance. Do I understand that correctly?
And for the previous, and for this piece of advice, right?
I think it would be appropriate for the DOE to resend its response to our last advice and reissue.
I'll take that request back.
Chris.
Well, it's true that a fair bit of the advice came out of the 5-year plan. There are also items in there that had nothing to do with the 5-year plan. And I think it's, in particular, that's where we would have liked to have some specific response on. There's several suggestions, not just this year, but in past years, calling for DOE to consider plans on certain topics, to issue plans. In the last several advices, we have wanted to see some acceleration rather than have things drag on. And again, I think these are things that we would have liked to see some specific responses for. If it comes right out of the 5-year plan, it's not surprising that you say, yeah, we agree with you. But every work priority advice has had other items in, and those are the ones in particular that we'd really like to see some specific response on.
Understood. Thank you, Chris.
And I do want to state in a data point to what Mia said. I think Mia was the EPA response. I did reach out to Davina, and it is on their list of things to do. They've been bogged down, but they do have an intent to respond to our advice.
Sorry. This just raised a good conversation or a good idea kind of in my brain was we're one of the only boards that's got, the kind of more unique structure with EPA and ecology. So I'm assuming when the ecology and EPA do our responses, we should probably follow the same kind of expectations or guidelines that Susan was just talking about, perhaps, but unless anybody thinks differently. But just as an aside, yes, we issued our advice. I just want to offer that if anybody has any specific feedback for ecology on not just this advice for cleanup priorities, but any other advice response that we develop, feel free. It doesn't have to be now. Feel free to follow up with me and let me know, and I'm happy to take it back because I work very closely with my fellow management when I draft the responses. And if there's things we can do better, please come let me know.
One last thing. Ecology asked for some clarifications on certain topics in our last work priority advice. And so I met with Ryan and Dan McDonald, and we talked for about an hour. on 4 or 5 different items that were clarification. What was our intent? They had some thoughts, so on and so forth. A good discussion. And those were actually the topics that ecology responded to in their advice. Wanting clarification and then responding to us on those particular topics. And I think that would be handy for EPA and DOE as well. Going forward, if there's some clarification needed, some discussion needed before the response is given, I think that would be a very good thing to kind of institutionalize or to go forward with. Because I think it was really helpful in this regard with ecology.
Okay, do we have a path forward?
So my path forward is I'm going to take the comments that I received today from the board, as well as Tom's request for DOE to resend a response to HAB Advice 314 back, and I will wrap back around when I have a response.
Jeff, we good? Mia, we good?
I appreciate this conversation. So thank you.
Any other new business thoughts, announcements? Real quick, I do want to recognize that Ginger Wireman is going to be moving to another part of ecology. And so she will no longer be supporting the HAB directly because she won't be working with Ryan anymore. So just recognize that, you know, if you have her email or send her a note thanking her, welcoming, you know, she's excited to be starting a new job. And then 2 weeks from this weekend, I believe Ryan gets married.
And he just had a birthday yesterday.
So is there anything else? Thank you for a very successful meeting. Lindsay, do you want to adjourn the meeting?
Sure, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Name tags and committee signups on the way out, please and thank you.